Hey there and welcome back to another Miraculous Ladybug video. And today we'll be returning to the character of Chloe now that her arc is well and truly done and dusted. Chloe is one of those characters that just tears the fandom apart. Either you like her or you hate her with a venomous fury, and there's really no in between. Thus, when there was that brief moment in time where it looked like Chloe was going to be getting some sort of interesting hero arc, and it got taken away and replaced with a pretty bland villain story, it definitely ripped the fandom in two. There were those that were excited that the show wasn't trying to whitewash her, and they were keeping her as the selfish and unreasonable character she always has been. And then there were some that believed she deserved a redemption arc, and that it was bad writing to tease one and then revert her back to being a complete villain. And honestly, I can see where both sides of this argument are coming from. And now that we've seen the impact that Season 4's had on her character, I think I'm in a much better position to decide whether I think the story arc Chloe's been given has been the right move for her. Now, we'll start off looking at it from the perspective of the Chloe sympathizers. Those that think she deserves better from the writing and that her character's been butchered since Miracle Queen, and that all the development she's received was scrapped. And yeah, I can see where they're coming from a little bit. In Season 1, when we're introduced to Chloe, she's just the worst. Seriously, just the worst sort of person. She's a mean and overly cruel bully who just picks on people because she can. Who manipulates her father into doing her bidding simply because she wants to, who doesn't care about anybody but herself, and even treats one of her actual friends like a borderline slave. Seriously though, throughout Season 1 and parts of Season 2, she's just the worst, isn't she? Always teasing, always bullying, constantly putting everybody in danger by getting people akumatized, being super creepy towards one of the main characters in Adrien, constantly baby talking him and trying to win his affection, whilst bullying the hell out of the other main protagonist, Marinette. So yeah, not a good start for Chloe. So that's really where we stood at the end of Season 1. A spoiled brat with no real depth. Until Season 2 came along and we started to unravel a little bit more about Chloe's character. We learned that she actually kind of suffers from parental abuse in that her mum's neglectful and cruel, and her father overcorrects and spoils her to the point that it's utterly destroyed her personality. So on one hand, she tries to mimic her mum and therefore acts super entitled and bratty, and then on the other hand, she gets whatever she wants because she's daddy's perfect little princess. Basically the perfect recipe for disaster. And actually, it's a pretty deep and rich backstory that you can draw on for an interesting hero or villain. And it really just explains why she behaves the way she does, as she models her behaviour on her mum's behaviour and expects characters like Adrien to behave like her dad and love her and spoil her no matter what. But throughout the first 2 seasons, we see that her one bright spot is Ladybug. She loves Ladybug. She wants to be Ladybug, which is hilarious for a multitude of reasons, including the person she admires most being the person she actually hates most, and that she wants to be the ultimate heroine that constantly helps others, while she also constantly belittles everybody. Ladybug is essentially her antithesis, but she puts her up on this pedestal and admires her anyway. And then, through a series of random mistakes, she actually gets her hands on the Be Miraculous and gets her chance at being a hero. And throughout that arc, she actually does make some changes. She isn't perfect by any means, but it's obvious that the writing tries to show her becoming less mean, admitting to some of her faults and insecurities, and that she has the potential to become a good person. Not to mention, she had some cool hero moments, like when she rejected getting akumatized, and even had moments where she put aside her disdain for Marinette and worked with her to try and achieve a common goal. Hell, she even just tried to be nicer in general, thanks to Adrien's prodding. So when you look at it from this perspective, having her go full villain by the end of Season 3 is kind of wasteful. You had this character who looked like she was going to be built up as the anti-hero, the reluctant hero. Somebody who was willing to do good things, but more for the prestige of being able to say she saved the day, not because she necessarily cares all that much. And considering all the other Miraculous heroes do good out of the kindness of their hearts, I think this would have been an interesting character development and created a much cooler dynamic in the team than Zoe provides. Because really, to me, Zoe is just Marinette, but without all of Marinette's development. So just a pretty generic, nice character. Yes, she had the whole mimic Chloe's meanness arc, but that lasted what, an episode? Not much on her since then. And for Chloe to go from that sort of reluctant and selfish hero to a full-on villain, I don't know, I can see how it's a bit of a slap in the face. It makes you feel like that whole arc was just wasted time. Why even bother having her at all as a hero if you're going to go down that path anyway? Just have her steal the Miraculous and make her lose it and make this push her towards Hawkmoth out of her hatred for Ladybug. The hero she admires who embarrassed her publicly. Make her want to make Ladybug pay. But they don't do this. The writing negates it by having her look back on her past mistakes and recognize that she's cruel and that she blames others because of her own insecurities. It just doesn't make that much sense to put a character on the path to correction, a path that she doesn't have to walk very quickly. It could take seasons to make her much nicer, to only rip out the rug from underneath her and go all the way back to square one. But honestly, I think the worst part is that after all that, after a hero arc turned to villain arc, there was still a chance for the character to be a bit more interesting, but the writers didn't take it. They didn't push her forward more as a character. They didn't focus on her feelings of betrayal towards Ladybug and her growing hatred. They just reverted her to Season 1 Chloe, a character who simply despises everybody and who lives to try and embarrass Marinette and act as bratty as possible. And to me, that writing just feels a little haphazard. Like they initially wanted her to have that hero arc, changed their minds, and then didn't know what to do with the character after her betrayal. She has no real direction. And I think that's pretty obvious when you watch her in the show. And then, on the other hand, we have the Chloe haters. Those who think she doesn't need or deserve a redemption arc and that she's better off in the role she occupies now. And I can definitely see where those people are coming from. Whilst the writing did seem a little bit choppy and back and forth, the actual story arc does make sense if you look at it from a character point of view. Chloe's always been awful. At least she's always been awful within the confines of the show. From Season 1, Episode 1, she's been the primary antagonist that Marinette's had to contend with. Yes, Hawkmoth was lurking in the background, but it was Chloe that bullied Marinette, that bullied Marinette's friends. It was her actions that set off things in the first place. She hates Marinette, and Marinette, whilst I wouldn't say she hates Chloe, obviously doesn't like her. So why the hell would she give her a Miraculous? I mean, in canon, she didn't even intend to give it to her in the first place. I'm pretty sure it was for Alia. It was an accident. So why the hell would she even want to keep giving it back to her over and over? I feel like Marinette needs to be able to completely trust people that she gives superpowers to. Why would she ever trust somebody like Chloe? Somebody who's bullied her and her friends for years with no hints of remorse. Who's rude and cruel and only wants to do things that conform to her best interests. If I was the Guardian, I would nope out of there as well, and probably be not as nice about it as Ladybug was. And then, on top of that, we see that as soon as she can, Chloe just full on tells the world that she's Queen Bee to get some clout. Like, come on now. Keep your identity secret. It's like the #1 rule, the most important rule, and she breaks it in her debut episode, I'm pretty sure. So from a writing point of view, it does make sense to push her away from being a hero, because by doing this, she's proved to Marinette that she's not ready to be a hero at this point, and just poses a general risk. Because we've seen from Sentibubbler that Shadowmoth is willing to go to your house and target your family to get his way. And I'm not sure Chloe could come up with a plan to outsmart him like Alia did. So in the end, it would just end up being a major disaster. So this is where I sit now. From a meta writing point of view, Chloe's minor redemption arc ending in her becoming a supervillain and then reverting to how she was in Season 1 is wasteful and kind of boring. But from an in-character standpoint, it makes so much sense that she remains a villain. I mean, why would Marinette want her help? She wouldn't. She's literally the last person she'd ask if this was real life. It just makes zero sense. Plus, her turning villainous actually makes perfect sense. Local bully allies with a powerful villain for personal vendetta against the girl that has everything she truly wants, a loving family, and a friend that cares about her. What really ruins all of it, though, is the inclusion of Lila, because Chloe was ripe for that role. Lila's interesting, sure, but why didn't they just have these characters be the same person? Because now you have a villain that's barely appeared this season, and we're going to be force-fed how she's actually important, whilst we have a noob villain who should have the limelight but doesn't and is quite frankly lame and lost at this point. Just toss her in the bin. It's like the writers keep scratching over what they've originally written in the script, but nothing's stuck, and so the page is all messy, and they should really just throw it away. And at the end of the day, it feels like we wasted time on her arc, and the writers just used her as they needed to fill the void with the Bee Miraculous, as it was one of the primary Miraculouses at that time. Essentially stubborn writing because they couldn't be bothered to add a different character early on to take it, or just change the design of the Miracle Box. It ain't that hard. So here comes Zoe, who is Chloe, but nice. She has a complicated relationship with her mother, just like Chloe, and acts out to try and win her approval. But whilst Chloe has a doting dad who spoils her rotten to compensate, Zoe doesn't seem to. Her dad's probably more like Audrey. So she doesn't become entitled like Chloe, and she eventually gives up trying to win approval by emulating their mother, because she doesn't have a parent who can overcompensate when it fails. Really, all she has is her stepdad who treats her pretty kindly. So this allows her to be the character that I initially think they intended for Chloe to become, before they realised it would never really make sense or feel like Chloe could actually become friends with Marinette and all. Basically, Chloe has a safety net to fall back on, which enables her to continue being terrible, but Zoe doesn't. She can't afford to alienate her friends. And being cruel for attention doesn't give her anything anyway, so she can be kind instead. So when I look at it from that perspective, whilst I understand people being upset at her current story, I think it's necessary at this point. There's no coming back from this now, and it would feel ridiculous to try. Good Chloe could have made sense once, but her character in Season 1 was just too much, and it was going to take way more than her small moments in Season 2 for Marinette to be able to fully trust and like her. If she was going to have this arc, they needed to wind back her entitlement and bullying attitude once she received the miraculous and Ladybug put faith in her. That was her moment. When Ladybug tries to protect her and tell her that she can't be a miraculous holder anymore, she shoots herself in the foot by expecting Ladybug to come back to her anyway. She needed to grow up and understand the situation when it was not directly affecting just her. But she couldn't get past her selfish needs and completely turned in the other direction. And don't get me wrong, I think it's fair to feel ripped off or unsatisfied, as it did feel like there was going to be a build up to something a bit better. But when you really break it down, it does make sense for her to behave this way, even if the writing's less than ideal. In my opinion, I do actually like that she remained a villain, but I feel like it was just handled so badly. It literally only works because the writers changed tact and decided to continue to make her a villain. But the problem was they didn't heighten her entitlement enough, and they added too much vulnerability to her when she was a hero. So basically, her redemption genuinely made her seem like she was changing for the better, and they didn't really add that conflict of interest until it was way too late. They didn't make it abundantly clear that she was just doing this for fame or her own self-worth. And that's where it falls short. It would have been great if they showed her creating a fake sob story for Ladybug so that way she could become a hero for her own personal needs. But they didn't. And it really only makes sense that she gives up trying to be good because you can remember what she used to be like. But you also have to kind of awkwardly block out her attempts at getting better because it was almost done too well. You genuinely felt like she wanted to be a good person and change. And if they were going to just make her a villain again, they should not have had that. The pathway made sense, but the conflicting writing choices made it feel truly unorganic. With all that being said though, those are just my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of Chloe's story? Do you think she's been wasted, or do you think they've made the right call? I'm curious to hear what you have to say, so make sure to leave a comment and let me know.